This is our first pit stop of the academic year for 2025-26. And this is just a monthly series that we offer for faculty and instructional staff, graduate students, postdocs, anybody who's interested in teaching and learning. You have a home here. And we try very hard to be responsive to the needs of the community, as well as to emerging technologies and innovations that might be of interest for folks. This particular pit stop, I've been asked to incorporate more and more and more Canvas opportunities in our pit stop series, simply because we have lots of support from Global Campus to help us learn the basic tools of Canvas. But what I hear from faculty is they want to know how other faculty use these tools. Like there's this giant brain trust, and we want to learn from our faculty peers about how they use the tool. So to that end, I reached out to the Provost's Teaching Academy and asked that group of experts if they would be willing to share their insights about how they use Canvas. And so I'm very pleased to welcome today Kelley and Jenni Sandstrom, who are both members of the Teaching Academy. Jenni Sandstrom is an associate professor and academic director in hospitality business management. They're also the Todd and Maxine McClaskey Foundation endowed chair in hospitality and business management. So we're excited to have Jenni here, coming from Vancouver campus. So those electrons are really traveling a long way to me here in Pullman. But those of you who are joining from Vancouver, you can go and buy her a coffee after this and tell her thank you. And then we have Jane Kelley, also an associate professor and in the Department of Language, Literacy, and Technology. So both lots of expertise, not just about Canvas, but I would say that they are both pedagogical experts. So what I love about what they'll be able to share with you today is not just about the tool, but their rationale for why they use the tool the way they do and how that translates to student engagement and student learning. So the way we've structured today is Jane's going to share a little bit, and then Jenni's going to share a little bit, and then we're going to open it up to a Q&A where we can share from and with one another. So with no further ado, I'm going to press pausing for Jane and press pause for pausing. Is that what I said? Press pause on recording for Jane, and take it away, Jane.
And our information overlaps a little bit, but I think this is a really good topic for us just to explore a little bit. It kind of goes back to how you organize your Canvas space. If you're not using Canvas for a whole lot, then this might not be the right conversation for you. I use Canvas for everything. I want my students to have all of the information that they need at their fingertips. I use Canvas for testing on in most of I'm trying to think of a class that I don't offer Canvas tests. So I deliver even my big midterm exams, I'll deliver on Canvas. And so that's really what I wanted to talk about today, was some best practices for using test banks and for using quizzes through Canvas. So, we can have a larger conversation about effective Canvas use and all of that, but I think, really focusing on testing is important. And so what Jane, when Jane's talking about like building those test banks, even if you already have questions in Canvas, you can move those around and make them into a test bank. And there's something, and I'll show you how to do that in just a little bit. But really thinking about your overall structure of any test that you give. And as Jane was talking about, really naming a test question in a thoughtful way so that you can identify that later, because there's nothing more frustrating than digging through. I know I have a good test question out there and then kind of scrambling to fill in the blanks, literally and figuratively, but really kind of going back to how do you structure your tests overall. So really organizing your test banks by topics. I'll share, I might pop out of sharing in a minute, but I'll share my screen. So this is also I have to move my screens around. I haven't taught on Zoom for a little while, so excuse me, we all got so good at this for a little while, and now I feel like I'm not so good anymore. So when I look into my when I look into the test banks in general, I can go into my questions and I can take a look. This is just a quiz that I've had that I've put out in a class. And so all of the questions are organized with test banks. So these are test banks that I can use in other classes if I wanted to. These are named specifically for this class. This class is structured around modules and competencies. And so the coding in here, M1C5, that's very clear to me that that's module 1, competency 5, and I know what that is. So if somebody else were to take over this course material, they might have a little bit of a challenge with some of that. But I pull these questions together so that I can give the test so this test is remote. So they take it at home. It's open book, open note. And the only thing I ask from them is that they don't use ChatGPT. Most of the questions on this particular take-home test, usually I give tests in class, but for this particular test, it's all about self-reflection. So, for example, what's your conflict management approach? And give me an example of a way that it served you and a way that it did not, and some things like that. So, like, it's things where you have to write a story about yourself, and so ChatGPT might be able to help you BS your way through that, but you have to really you have to apply some of your own experiences to that. So when I go through here, so this is just one question in a test bank, but I could add another question to that if I wanted to. If I go into, there's a couple of these that have multiple questions. So for this, I've got 2 questions that are based on this competency in my leadership class. And so one of them is about processing feedback, and one of them is about steps of delegation. In this exam, I have it set up so that they only get 5 questions and they're all short answer. It's a 75-minute test. They've got about 15 minutes per question. Everybody always runs out of time. They have to know a little bit about the concept before they go into the test. They can't look up all the answers. It takes them way too long. But you might have the first question, you might have the second question. You're going to have one of these 2 questions. But if I'm sitting with my dorm roommates and we are going through this test together, which I've asked, it's an individual exercise, there's a really good chance that you're not going to have all the same questions as the person who is sitting next to you. Again, I've asked them to do it independently. I'm trusting that they do some of that. But we all know that if you give a take-home test, you have to be prepared for them to take it in groups. So please don't take this in a group. So anyway, going back to, so these question banks, here I got out of my quiz. So this is from this quiz, but each of the, so this is how my quiz is set up. I have it so that there's 5 questions, each is 10 points, and then each one draws from a question bank, only 1 question per question bank. And so there might be 2, sometimes there's 3 questions that I have in the question bank, and it just cycles through them. And so again, it just creates a test for that student that is a random draw for whichever question that they might possibly get. And then when I go to grade that test, I grade by question, and I just go through each question and I grade through every question as it comes up. So that's one way that I've used it with, and that's a pretty simple version of that. And we can talk, I'll talk a little bit about kind of how to build some of this. Let's see. And Erica, I trust you guys are monitoring the chat because I can't see it. Let's see. The other thing I wanted to bring up, this is from a different class. And this class, this is from an old sandbox, but this class, we have 1,000 students take this test every year, or take this class every year. And so we have a teaching group, so kind of a cadre of faculty who teach this together. We have weekly meetings on how to coordinate our course content. So our weekly meetings, we have certain people who are in charge of certain modules for the whole class. But when we do the exam, because we have so many students do it, we have a common testing time. So we reserve test time in Pullman. I give it individually during class in Vancouver. But some of the things that we do to make that test more cheat proof is to create different answers to the same questions, or to create different questions. So there are this is sorry, that was a bad example. I want to show you like on, I think there are, so this here, so this is a question about a Pareto chart. And there are two different questions. So like the items at the bottom of this Pareto chart have been scrambled. And so they're different. So the answer to the question is different. So if I'm sitting next to somebody, the question, I could look over and see it maybe looks the same. If I'm trying to cheat, you can't cheat on that particular question because the answer is actually different. And there's 3 different versions of it in here. So you might get any one of these 3 versions of this test question. So that's one of the ways that we do, that we go back to just trying to see how much we can modify each exam to really fit so each individual student has a little bit of a different test, so that you can't, so it takes chaining down a little bit. And yeah, okay, that's one part. Any questions? I am going to stop sharing for just a minute. Any questions about using test banks in that way, like to deliver a major exam with multiple exam questions? We can talk a little bit about actually designing the questions, if that's helpful.
Can I embroider onto that really quick, Jenny?
Yeah.
So what Jenny's using Canvas for, right, is each student has a different form of the exam in essence, right? Because they're pulling randomly from a set of questions. But they are equivalent forms. And for those of us who administer exams in person, in a large lecture environment, we may often do that, right? Create multiple forms of the exam. And I have colleagues who actually use Canvas to do that. So they'll go into student view and see what Canvas puts together, cut and paste it into their paper form that they're going to print out. So they don't have to do that little extra bit of time of randomizing. So it is an efficiency that you can use Canvas to help you do, even if you're not administering the exam via Canvas.
Okay. And so, just really thinking about some best practices, like Jane said, organizing your test topics, your test banks by topic is really important. Making sure that when you are when you're building a test, whether it's a quiz or an exam or whatever that looks like, when you do that, find questions. It's looking back to all of your test banks. It's looking back to all of your individual questions, and then you're picking them out of that. And so I can see, when I go make an exam, I teach a pretty broad array of subjects. I teach intro to business, but I teach wine tasting, so I go back to my questions. It's like, okay, questions of beer versus a lager versus an ale, it's okay. So I want to make sure that those questions are pretty clearly marked because I have such a broad array of subjects. And I mean, I can imagine too that Jane, with, thinking about literature and different genres and all of that, that there's, labeling things in a good way is super helpful, but also building your pools in a way that you're thinking that it could be reusable. Like what ways could you reuse this? Could you use a couple of questions in a test setting, or in a review setting, or in just a quiz setting that is more casual, that you could take multiple times and get see until you get the right answer? But building those test banks in a way that you could reuse them in a couple of different ways. The other piece is using that randomization and, really to enforce the integrity of your exam. And when you're creating that exam, you can tell it to pull 2 questions from this test bank and have a test bank of 10 questions, right? So then you really have some variety of those questions that come through. If it is automatically graded, so if they're multiple choice questions, I don't use a lot of multiple choice questions, but that's a great way to use multiple choice questions. If you've got, say 5 or 10 questions and you're only using a few of them, then you can ask the test bank and I can show you how to do that, but you can ask the test bank to only pick a couple of those questions. But that's one way that you can really improve the efficiency in grading, but also the integrity of the exam. Um, and then if you're shuffling your answer choices, and I think Jane said that when you're building the quiz, you can say shuffle the answers. You can't shuffle the questions per se. The order of the exam is the way that you structure it, which that I appreciate that. In my BA 100 class, I try to group questions and I want them in a certain order because I do a question like at the end that the first question depends on the second question depends on the first question, third question depends on the second question, and you have to answer them in sequence. And so if you scramble, you don't get that. And so I could put them in order of test banks, and then the answers go off of each other. And so you have to really kind of coordinate that piece of it when you really get detailed with the working parts like that. But then it definitely increases your flexibility, but you can shuffle the answers when you're doing multiple choice. You can shuffle those questions within the test bank, and then you can shuffle the answers within the actual questions, which gives you some additional flexibility. And recycling and improving over time is always a good practice. I look at the test questions I pointed out for my leadership class. I mean, I update those. I deliver the class only once a year, but I definitely update at least 3 questions a semester, every time I teach the class. And so I do keep some of the questions. There's 2 questions on this test that I think I've had for, I don't know, 8 years, because it's a good question. What's your conflict management style and how does it work for you? And, some things like that I think that students, I think that as they're going through the test, it's another level of learning for them too. So, tag for easy sorting is also important. And then the other piece that might be important to some of you is that, when you build those test banks, you can share them across courses. So if you have a class that is somewhat related to a class that you're teaching and you want to pull a couple questions over. For example, when I do the capstone for hospitality, I do kind of a pre-knowledge check, and I'll go back to some of my other classes and I'll pull in questions. It's just it's not a test it's a test for knowledge. It's not a test for points, right? So I'll pull questions from other classes that I've taught to just summarize, okay, these are things that I hope you've pulled out of these other classes. Can you answer these? And how do you answer these? And can you answer these? And these are going to be important for you coming forward with the rest of your class. So I can stop there. I can stop there and see kind of where everyone's leaning toward as far as what you want more information on. I can show more about um, doing. Oh, sorry. Thought I was still sharing my screen. I can share more about the how to build different parts of this, but I want to focus on what's important to all of you. What do you think?
If there are specific questions that folks have, or if you have something that you do in Canvas that makes your life easier, or a mistake that you learned in Canvas that you'd love to share with a colleague so they don't make the same mistake, that's also fair game right now. I can share one thing that I do that I took for granted that everybody knew was an option in Canvas. Let me see if I can. So here what I've done is I've just taken some screen captures of my Canvas just so that you wouldn't see who my students were. um, it's not easy to show this in a sandbox because you don't have any grades in your sandbox. So you can't show folks what is possible. But this is from a course I taught this spring. And this is what my menu looks like on the left for my students. Of course, you can customize this to be to look however you want it to look. And I would say that one thing to consider when you're looking at this is to make it so that only the links that are absolutely necessary for your students Those should be the only ones that are showing. So if you have a class where maybe you don't want them to see the individual assignments here because you want to access them in a particular order by working through modules, you might, for example, hide the assignments link. Okay, so just think about how you want your students to interact with your space so that they are finding the content exactly where you want it and in the order that you want them to find it. One of the mistakes I made early on was there's the files option. That meant students can see every single file I had uploaded. It's like basically looking in my OneDrive file, right? And or the equivalent thereof. And they were so confused, right? Because they were seeing all of this content without any context. So I keep things like files hidden. What I do know is that I have taught really big classes. And so that makes my communication with students an extra time burden. You know, when I'm communicating with only 10 students versus 300 students, every additional email I write is another 20 seconds added on to my workload. And so I'm always looking for efficiencies. One of those efficiencies I use is by doing batch emailing to my students. And you can do that by clicking. One of the ways I do it is I click on grades and it takes me to the grade book. And then let's say I wanted to reach out to students at week 4. So they've had several opportunities to be interacting with the content and kind of learning how the semester is going. And, you know, maybe I want to catch some students that I think might be struggling right now for whatever reason. And so I can come click on these 3 little dots above any given assignment. So I'm choosing week 4 here. And you can see all of this pops up. Okay. I can sort it in a variety of ways. I can go from here and go into SpeedGrader and look at individual student responses. But the one that I use, I'm sorry I didn't highlight properly. I use message students who. So that means when I click on message students who, this is what pops up. This is for that week 4 assignment. And it says, I can message students who have not yet submitted, who have submitted, who I have not yet graded their stuff, or I can email students who scored below or above a particular threshold. And so I find this to be very useful for identifying my students who might need a little extra support from me. I generally will message students if they score, if they're scoring, you know, below a C. And I'll just write an email that says maybe something along the lines of, hey, I noticed that you may not have gotten the score that you were hoping to achieve. And there's still lots of opportunities to learn and grow in this class. I'm available if you think that there'd be, right, like you're reaching out to them and offering them some support. Similarly, for those who have not yet submitted, particularly if I'm seeing that they have not yet submitted multiple assignments, these are students that I'm really concerned about because I'm concerned that there might be other extenuating circumstances that is preventing them from coming to class or interacting with the content. So, but when you do click on any of these, then it'll give you all of the students that meet that criteria. You can blow it up and you can see all the individual names, and you can either send it to all of them, which means each student will get an individual email with whatever you put in the text here, or you can be more selective. So perhaps I look at the students who scored less than 7 out of 10, but I already know I have a really good relationship with like 3 of them and they don't need this extra email. I can delete them from the recipient list. Okay. So just a quick way to communicate with students and really help reach out for support early and often with them. Any other tips folks have, or things they wish they could do in Canvas, but they weren't sure how? Did you know that you can make rubrics in Canvas that are attached to just a question, right, Jenny? Or to a,
I tried to unmute and I clicked on something else. You can only, on a quiz, you can only attach a rubric to the quiz level, and you can't use it for grading. You can only use it for feedback, but you can't embed it into a question. You can put your grading notes in a question. There's a spot where you can put grading notes in. You can pre-populate grading notes that I use as kind of as a rubric. But when I have a TA help me, that helps them to know what to grade. But you can only attach it at the quiz level. Sarah, do you have a question?
I do. And maybe you already went over this because I'm joining quite late. I'm going to turn my camera off because my bandwidth seems low. Um, uh, what about making a sign-up list within Canvas? For example, we're running a course. We've got 6 field trips, and we would like to have a place where people can sign up for those field trips. Right now, we're squishing it into announcements and asking people to reply with their name. But is there a better way to do that?
I have a suggestion for you.
Okay.
Here, I'll show you.
Thanks, Jenny.
Yeah. Let's see here. If you go into, okay, so I'm just in my sandbox right now, but there's this tab called collaborations.
Oh,
If you go into
there it is.
so collaborations
Uh-huh.
has a couple different ways you can use it. You can use a Google Doc or you can use Office 365. I use Office 365, even though students sometimes prefer Google Docs. I know that they are required to have Office 365 because they get it through their WSU subscription. And so that's what I typically use. And then you can add in a document here. So like if you uploaded a document, like a sign up sheet and then it creates for you a live document that has collaboration abilities. So it's a shared document on Office 365 that you can monitor.
That is great.
So I use it for this exact purpose. So in my BA 100 class, I have students sign up for a business to evaluate their marketing and in the marketing module. And so I want to pick the businesses so that I kind of have some consistency in size of business. And so I've got Nike and Xerox and I go through this whole list, and it's first come, first serve that students have to get on in this way and do that. Or I've also done like a journal when I've had groups. I've created collaboration journals, groups to collaborate so I can monitor it. That one was a little clunky, and I think I abandoned it after the first time I did it. But this I did use for signups, just like you're talking about.
Great. That is wonderful. Now, I do have a question though, because on my collaborations, there is one of the eyes that you have next to your pages and various things. I'm not sure what that
You
means.
just have to enable it. So when you go into, you have to go into settings. When you go into the navigation page in settings, you just drag it up.
Okay.
Do you want me to show you that?
I just went, okay, I'm in navigation, and these are the ones that are hidden. Okay, I see how to do that. Excellent.
And then you drag it up into the visible spot, and then you have to save it. So go all the way down to the bottom and save it. That's always my thing. I click out of it and like, where is it? You have to save it.
I have done that so many times, Jenny, and I'm like, why does Canvas hate me?
Why? Yeah. It hates me today. But Sarah, when you build that document ahead of time, and then you can load it into there versus trying to build it through that collaboration, I think you can just upload a document, and that works too.
Okay. Okay. And then since we're on it, I have another question. What's the difference between the Zoom 1.3 and the Zoom link that are over on the left-hand side? And can we put an already established link that we're using in there?
Doo-doo-doo.
You know what? When you have a Zoom link in your left, on the left side, it
Mhm.
automatically connects to whoever's the faculty. It connects to your Zoom. So like if
Okay.
I were to go into Zoom independently, I can see my course, because I teach through video conference, I can see my video conference classes in my personal Zoom because
Okay.
it links it when I'm the professor.
Uh-huh.
And so I think if you build it through your class, it's going to put it in your personal space. I could be told, I'm not a Zoom expert. I could be
Okay.
totally wrong on that, but I think that it automatically pulls it into your personal Zoom, into your Zoom account overall.
Okay.
I
Oh,
want to say that there was something strange about Zoom this summer because I had it as a link in my navigation as well.
uh-huh.
And um and I wanted to record all of the, like, I held office hours, but I wanted to record
Mhm.
them in case students wanted to go back. And the this might be what you're talking about, Jenny, is that my graduate TA was holding the office hours and they did not have the ability
Ah,
to record.
yeah.
And I could not add them as a co-host,
Oh, huh.
which was interesting. So, setting it up through Zoom is great because it's already there and it's married to your course. If you need a one-off where you want to have multiple co-hosts, you can create the joining link. Like you can create the meeting in your own personal Zoom. You can
Mhm.
add it as a link in a module, on a
Right.
page, and then on your personal side, you can invite people as co-hosts and which gives them the opportunity to record if that's something you need.
It would be great if you could do that exact thing and put it under one of the Zoom titles. There's the 1.3 and then the Zoom link. But maybe you can.
It's a question that I would reach out to the global campus, the AOI folks, and actually AOI now has, I noticed, drop-in Canvas hours.
Mm,
Let me see if I can find those. Those are new. They brought them back. We had them when we went through the on-demand support. I'll put the link here in the
great.
chat if I can find chat. Scroll down to the bottom of the page and you'll see that the on-demand support is available from 9 to 11:30 and 1:30 to 4 p.m. Monday through Friday.
Oh, that's fabulous. Okay. Thank you. Thanks to both of you on those questions.
They were really good questions. And thanks, Jenny. I've never been brave enough to use the Collaborate tool in Canvas. So it was good to hear that it's a useful tool
Yeah.
for this.
It was a little chunky when I tried to do these journals. I had them do a simulation through all through the marketing module in this class, and I wanted them to write down their decisions. Like, what were you deciding in the simulation? Because I needed them to reflect on it later, but I wanted to make sure that they were doing it and writing stuff down. And so I made it through the collaboration journal. So I made it through, at one point I had made it just through Office 365 so I could see it and I could kind of monitor it. And so when I put it in it was just a little, that one was just a little clunky. And I think that we had some technical errors on the student side because half the class, I mean, this is a class of like 75 students, half the class did it perfectly. The other half the class was like, what? And so it was a little, the what faction, yeah, their grades, I think in the end probably weren't as good because they didn't understand the whole process,
Yeah.
but it was fun. What are some other questions out there?
Jenny, I think you may have covered this, but when, okay, so I know in my sandbox I can see all of my question banks, but let's say I'm in Business 101 and I want to pull questions from another class. Can
Uh-huh.
I do that, or do
Yep.
I have to export the bank and then import it?
You don't have to export the bank. You can do it just like Jane showed you with when you search, when you find the search for the questions, it brings up pretty much all of your questions from other classes. It doesn't really matter. You can also import. So if I know that I'm importing, just let me give you an example in BA 100, because we have this whole teaching cadre that gets together with this class. We build the whole class out in the sandbox, and then we all import it into our own Canvas spaces and then tweak it for our own semester if we're teaching a different day or doing different things like that. So we tweak it. But when it comes to the tests, you have to make sure if you're importing a test, you've got to get all the test banks. Because if you're trying to deliver a test and you have imported just the quiz and not the test banks, then it doesn't connect to anything. And so so somewhere those test banks need to exist. So if you are importing a full test from another class, you need to import the quiz, the question banks also.
Yeah, and Erica, my test banks were I created them in the courses, not in the sandbox. And that's why I didn't have any question banks in my sandbox, because I created them somewhere else.
Okay.
And also I got to a point, I was doing some other stuff in my sandbox and it got so too big, too much stuff in there. So I actually went in and wiped everything out of my sandbox, which was fine because I could still get into, when I go in the sandbox to do the quizzes, as you could see, all of the test banks from my courses, I could still have access to them.
Okay. Okay.
So none of my test banks were in the sandbox. They were all
Got it.
housed somewhere else.
Do you want, I can show you how to, this is a little bit different subject, but like if you have questions in your Canvas space already and you want to make test banks out of them, I can show you how to do that. Would that be useful?
Sure. I like learning stuff.
Okay. So I'm going to take you into, so this is again, this is just a sandbox and these are a bunch of different question banks. But if I go to my quiz, let me go to the first quiz. The first quiz, I randomly created some questions yesterday that I'm never going to use. Erica, didn't you say we never would do that? So I just created a couple of questions here. So these questions aren't in a test bank. So if I wanted to put them in a bank, I could do that. I can go to, I need to go back a step. I need to go back to quizzes and then go to the little dots. And this is what Jane showed you earlier. And I can go to manage question banks. There's an option, if you click on any of these question banks, there's an option to move the questions around. But this is what I'm going to tell you. I'm going to go to these unfiled questions because these are questions that I was just looking at. These are questions that they're not in any kind of question bank. So if I click on those unfiled questions, over here I can say move multiple questions. So if you go to that, I can go here and I can say, okay, there's two leadership questions, leadership style questions that I want to put into a question bank. So I can go here, but then it's asking what the destination is. I don't have a bank for those. I want to just make one on the fly. I can go all the way to the bottom and say new question bank, and I can say leadership style question. Obviously, I practiced this yesterday. And then I can move those questions. Okay, so then those questions now, they're not in my unfiled questions anymore. So then I have to go back to, I can go back to my question banks and I've got this leadership style questions and they're here. So if I want, sorry, this is super fast, but if I want to put those into a quiz, I can go to quiz here and I can edit. I can go to my questions and then I can add a question bank here. So the questions are already in here, but I can add a question bank here to this, like Jane showed you earlier. I can add a question bank here with those questions that I just created. And then I can kind of work on my points to see how those points worked out. I want to, so if I go to find questions, I see this is what I was talking about. I've got beer questions. I've got a million questions here. I think if if there's not a search mode. Is there a search mode here? So I can, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
I don't know if there's a search mode. That was the one I had troubles this summer, and I just didn't have enough time to figure out if there was a search mode.
Yeah. I want it displays past it. Oh, there we go. So I can add this leadership style questions. I want to add both. No, let's see. Oh no. I'm going to go back here. That's what I want. I want to add that. See that? Okay. That was a little clunky.
But what I think you're modeling to us too, Jenny, is that you're not going to break anything by
No,
right?
for sure
Like,
not. Yeah. Well, and so once you go back and you add those questions in, then you can reassign those points. That's really my point here too, is that I want to know when I build a quiz and I add those question banks. So here I have pick one question. So if I want to edit this, I can pick, 2 questions, 10 points per question. You want to make sure that your quiz, so right now my quiz adds up to 53 points. It's only a 50-point test. So I need to make sure I need to go delete something. Because I added those 3 questions at the bottom. But so when you add those, then you can make it, you have to just go in and adjust that and say, okay, I don't want to use this question now. So I'm going to take that out and I'm going to add this other question instead. Was that too clunky?
no, that's good. That's good. I inherited a course and I went in and it had 433 unfiled questions.
Oh,
And I was like, and they were all called question.
because that's the default.
That's the default. So that's how I spent my summer break.
Wow.
But once I could convert them from the unfiled questions, even just getting them named so I could find them, then it was much easier to move, like you showed, Jenny, move them into a question bank. Well, we're coming up on the hour. Are there any other pressing questions or pearls of wisdom that need to be shared? I will share one thing that I do. I don't know if you know this, but you can write all of your announcements at the beginning of the semester and set them to release at particular times. I just never thought that that would be something I would do, but I tell you what, I'm always very good the first 5 weeks of the semester over communicating to my students, right? And then the wheels fall off. So I just populate them ahead of time. And that way, if I get behind, I'm just changing the dates of the announcements rather than having to remember to generate new ones when things get, because I'm never perfectly on time. You probably are, but I am not.
I do that with adaptive release also with my course content. Sometimes I'm not quite ready, but also like BA 100, we are team teaching. So we're not 100% ready every week. We meet 2 weeks in advance. So we're ready a week in advance, but we do an adaptive release. Now it used to be you could just do it, you could just pick a date to release like at the module level, but now you can actually do it lower than that. You can do more granular than that. Which is really nice. Sometimes like my to-do list, if I'm in a module and I've got 3 weeks of to-do lists within a module, I can release it at the to-do list level, at the week level, whatever that is. But that is really nice when you are trying to go back to, when I promise my students I'm going to release it by noon on Wednesday, like you darn well better release that. Like, oh, whoops, sorry, it's midnight. I missed it. But that's a nice feature to have too.
Yeah.
And also if your course builds on itself and you only want to release a certain amount of content at a time, doing that adaptive release is really nice.
Oh, hi, Erica. Yeah, thank you. I think the way, like you said, how to set you can put like all the announcement at the beginning, and then so is that like set the available from date? That's how you do that. So
I'm not sure how other people do it. I can share, and this is in my sandbox, so I haven't done it in here.
Available from, yeah.
But like, I clicked on announcements and then I clicked on create a new announcement, and I can type in the title and whatever it is. Hi. I can specify who I'm posting it to, so I can actually create groups in my class and only have the announcement show up to certain groups. So if I have like graduate students and undergrads in the same course, but it's a graduate student only announcement, I can do that. But then it's down here. I can set the availability for in the future. So I can say I want it to be available on the 17th at noon, right? And then if I want it to be available indefinitely, I can, so that there's a history of those announcements. Or if I don't want to clutter up my announcement page, then I can say it's only open for, a few days. And then it's there. It'll show up, it'll pop up when it's time.
So Eric, I wanted to add, with the announcements, what I found, you can't do it like a draft. And if you, as soon as you press send, it will go to everyone unless you do the later date.
Yes.
So I've, what I kind of do for myself, because I'll be like starting an announcement and then like, I don't have time to finish it, but I don't want to lose it. So I just put like 3 days from now. That's how I kind of save it until I'm ready to actually send out the announcement. So
That's good. I like it.
yeah, I wish they had a post or a publish, but they don't. It's once you're doing an announcement, it goes right out unless you delay it. So that's how I trick it to save a
Good trick.
draft.
That's what we have to do. Think outside the box. Okay. Well, I know you've been great sports in joining us. If you have questions, I showed you where the drop-in office hours are with the AOI folks, but honestly, you can go to the WSU Teaching Academy website and get a list of all of its members, and you can see who says that they have some expertise in Canvas. Reach out to them. Like if you want to get some new ideas from your fellow faculty, you can do that too. But anyway, thanks for joining us, and thank you so much, Jenny and Jane, for sharing your expertise. I appreciate your time.
Thank you. This is fun. Thanks for inviting us.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.